Welcome to Vulnerability Assessments. Thank you for taking the course. We'll be going over a few things, but now that you're here, let's get started. Hope you enjoy the course.
Welcome to the course. In this section, we will be going with vulnerability assessments. The Security Survey. Before any project begins, there must be an assessment made in order to put together an operational plan and a practical approach to securing the facility. This security assessment can also be called a security survey, vulnerability assessment, or risk analysis. No one with any common sense starts a project without a plan. A ship's captain would never leave port without navigational tools, maps, global positioning systems, and a seasoned crew. The same goes for security professionals who will need the tools to initiate a security assessment. It makes no sense to throw up cameras without any rhyme or reason. This would be a waste of resources and money, both of which are in short supply. A security assessment is a comprehensive overview of the facility including physical security controls, policy, procedures, and employee safety. In the beginning, a good assessment requires the security professional to determine specific protection objectives. These objectives include threat definition, target identification, and facility characteristics. The first question a security professional should be asking is, what is the threat? Then start down the list of the potential threats to the organization or facility. Is it vandals, hackers, terrorists, internal employees, corporate spies, or a combination? Stating the threat will identify how adversaries can impact assets and will provide guidance for developing a sound physical protection system. This is a sample of a defined threat matrix. As you can see, it is a bit simplistic. Here we create a list of assets, the probability of attack, and the consequences of the loss. For example, maybe you are working on a military base, and you are securing aircraft, documents, and other similar things. In this example, here in the US, the probability of someone attacking an aircraft may be low, but if something bad were to happen to that aircraft, the consequences could be dire. And before you say this will never happen, people have in the past trespassed onto federal installations to do just that. It may be unlikely, but it does happen. We will show you something that occurred back in 2008 after this slide. Target identification is concerned with the most valuable asset that needs to be protected. Assets can be personnel, property, equipment, or information. To identify assets to be protected, it would be prudent to prioritize the assets or establish a matrix and identify the asset in conjunction with the probability of attack, along with the question, what would be the impact and consequence of the loss of the asset?
So this happened back in 2008. A group of individuals went to a military base and decided they would tag Air Force One. Now, they believe it was stupid just tagging. However, they went on an Air Force base, they climbed the fence, they went on the line, which by the way, in the Air Force base, if you go, if anyone goes anywhere near an aircraft, it's considered a threat. They're called a covered wagon, and it goes all the way up, all the way up to the Pentagon. And it's an issue. Now, thankfully, it was just tagging, but this could have been an explosive device, they could have damaged the aircraft in any way. So if you think stuff like this doesn't happen, it does, and people just don't care. They do things to be silly. These people were lucky to survive, but if you ever wonder if these things happen, they do. They can. So just keep an eye out for that.
Facility characteristics involve several things to look at from the standpoint of whether this is an existing structure or new construction. The security professional is reviewing architectural drawings, doing a walkthrough of the facility, or both. In the case of an existing structure, it is recommended that a team of security personnel walk the facility. This goes with the old adage that two heads are better than one. Having several eyes on the project will assist in developing a good evaluation. The American Institute of Architects has established some key security questions that need to be addressed while performing the security assessment. Conducting a site security assessment is something you may have to do as a security practitioner. Many companies already have something like this written up already. However, what we are providing for you are just a few sample questions such as: what do we want to protect? What are we protecting against? What are the current or expected asset vulnerabilities? What are the consequences of loss? What specific level of protection do we wish to achieve? What types of protection measures are appropriate? What are our protection constraints? What are the specific security design requirements? How do the integrated systems of personnel, technologies, and procedures respond to security incidents? Walking with a team of security professionals through a facility will provide a static presentation of how to protect the facility. However, one of the best ways to build a comprehensive approach toward protecting the facility is by doing on-site interviews. Everyone has an opinion on security, and it is amazing that the best insight and information on what needs to be protected and how it should be protected comes from interviewing the staff. As I have stated before, I have found that one of the most astute and insightful persons interviewed has been the midnight security officer. He or she has nothing but time and walks the facility without interruption, seeing things that are only clearly visible at night. Another effective tool in assessing the current climate of security is to distribute a security questionnaire to gather a baseline for quantifiable data. Once these questions are answered and a thorough facilities evaluation and staff interview are completed, it is time to develop and outline a physical protection system for the facility. The assessment of any vulnerability of a facility or building should be done within the context of the defined threats and the value of the organization's assets. That is, each element of the facility should be analyzed for vulnerabilities to each threat, and a vulnerability rating should be assigned. You would not install $10,000 worth of security equipment in order to protect $100 worth of assets. Also, the decision to implement or not to implement countermeasures may be driven by the importance of the system or its data, or by mandates, as opposed to its cost. In either case, the sum of averted risks must be considered, where a single remedy will reduce several risks. The security professional must also consider the use and interaction of multiple remedies. One remedy may improve or negate the effectiveness of another. These considerations form the basis for determining which protective measures are the most appropriate. After having evaluated each risk and the loss that could occur, assessments can be made about the funds that can be allocated to lessen the estimated annual losses to an acceptable level. With information on a loss before and after the application of controls, cost evaluations will indicate which countermeasures are most cost-effective. When identifying the protective measures that should be implemented, consideration should be given first to the greatest risks. This here is a very short security questionnaire. You will use these when you are trying to ascertain the state of security of a site. You can give this to a number of employees, or just go around and ask them. Do they believe the site is generally safe? Are there any vehicle break-ins? Are there instances of sabotage? This is just a short list. As stated earlier, many companies have questionnaires such as this at the ready when they are about to stand up anything security contract. This here is a very short vulnerability matrix. It is self-explanatory. See how certain areas are labeled medium, high, low, etc. The front entrance is vulnerable to the outside. The receptionist is alone without security. But what does it mean, medium vulnerability or high vulnerability? It also should be noted that a vulnerability assessment may change the value rating of assets due to the identification of critical nodes or some other factor that makes the organization's assets more valuable. Here are some explanations. Very high. One or more major weaknesses have been identified that make the organization's assets extremely susceptible to an aggressor or hazard. High. One or more significant weaknesses have been identified that make the organization's assets highly susceptible to an aggressor or hazard. Medium-high. An important weakness has been identified that makes the organization's assets very susceptible to an aggressor or hazard. Medium. A weakness has been identified that makes the organization's assets fairly susceptible to an aggressor or hazard. Medium-low. A weakness has been identified that makes the organization's assets somewhat susceptible to an aggressor or hazard. Low. A minor weakness has been identified that slightly increases the susceptibility of the organization's assets to an aggressor or hazard. Very low. No weaknesses exist. Vulnerability is a condition of weakness. A condition of weakness creates an opportunity for exploitation by one or more threats. The level of risk is determined by analyzing the interrelationship of threats and vulnerabilities. A risk exists when a threat has a corresponding vulnerability, but even high vulnerability areas are of no consequence if no threats occur. When performing a vulnerability assessment (VA), the primary purpose is to evaluate all the components of the physical protection system. The key to a good vulnerability assessment is accurately estimating component performance. When the exploitation of vulnerability occurs, the asset suffers an impact. The losses are categorized in impact areas titled as the following. 1. Disclosure is a confidentiality issue. Greater emphasis is placed on this impact area when sensitive or classified information is being processed. 2. Modification occurs when an asset is changed from its original state. 3. Destruction is when an asset is damaged beyond practical use by threat actors. 4. Denial of service is an impact that is emphasized when threats are more likely to cause a temporary loss of capability than total destruction of modification. Therefore, by emphasizing one or more impact areas in the evaluation process, management can focus their resources on reducing the impact in the area that concerns them most. The primary goal of a physical protection program is to prevent the interruption of operations and provide for the security of information, assets, and personnel. In this concept, access control into the facility is utilized by barriers arranged in layers, with the level of security growing progressively higher as one comes closer to the center or the highest protective area. This design requires the attacker to circumvent multiple defensive mechanisms to gain access to the targeted asset. Implementing defense in depth requires that the security practitioner understand the goals of security. Essentially, security can be distilled down to three basic elements: availability, integrity, and confidentiality. Availability addresses the fact that legitimate users require resources, which should be available to the users as needed. Integrity relates to the concept that information is whole, complete, and remains unchanged from its true state. Confidentiality can be defined as ensuring that data is available to only those individuals that have legitimate access to it. Defending an asset with multiple postures can reduce the likelihood of a successful attack. If one layer of defense fails, another layer of defense will hopefully prevent the attack, and so on. For example, consider the layers of security at a local bank, which employs many redundant measures to protect personnel and assets. The fortress-like appearance and protective reputation synonymous with banking are likely a deterrent factor to some would-be bank robbers, but of course not all. The next line of defense that serves as both a deterrent and as a means for suspect apprehension and asset recovery is security cameras. This layer of security obviously has a level of failure. How many times have we seen video of bank robberies showing a suspect that was never caught? If the cameras are considered ineffective, the next layer is an armed security guard present as a deterrent factor and to defend the bank physically. This, too, is not 100% effective, as the security guard can be neutralized by the intruder. If the security guard is overpowered, the next layer involves hardware, such as bulletproof glass and electronically locked doors. Of course, not all branch offices are fortified in this manner, leaving the bank tellers vulnerable. In this case, the teller must rely on the silent alarm button, die packs, and robbery training. Some branches also have double time release doors where people are slightly delayed during ingress and egress. The vault itself has defense in depth through multiple layers of defense, such as opening only at certain controlled times, its heavy metal construction, and multiple compartments that require further access. The defense in depth principle may seem somewhat contradictory to the secure the weakest link principle, since we are essentially saying that defenses taken as a whole can be stronger than the weakest link. However, there is no contradiction. The principle secure the weakest link applies when components have security functionality that does not overlap. But when it comes to redundant security measures, it is indeed possible that the sum protection offered is far greater than the protection offered by any single component. Physical protection is no different from computer security and, in fact, it is a dovetail of the processes. You perform a threat analysis, design a system that involves equipment and procedures, and then test it. The system itself typically has a number of elements which fall into the essence of deter, detect, delay, respond. Deter is meant to render a facility as an unattractive target so that an adversary abandons attempts to infiltrate or attack. Examples of deterrence are the presence of security guards, adequate lighting at night, signage, and the use of barriers, such as fencing or bars on windows. While deterrence can be very helpful in discouraging attacks by adversaries, it cannot stop an adversary who chooses to attack regardless of your defenses, similarly to the bank robber who is absolutely set on robbing the bank and whom nothing is going to stop from attempting to rob the bank. The deterrent value of a true physical protection system can be very high while at the same time providing protection of assets in the event of an attack. Deter is meant to render a facility as an unattractive target so that an adversary abandons attempts to infiltrate or attack. Examples of deterrence are the presence of security guards, adequate lighting at night, signage, and the use of barriers, such as fencing or bars on windows. While deterrence can be very helpful in discouraging attacks by adversaries, it cannot stop an adversary who chooses to attack regardless of your defenses, similarly to the bank robber who is absolutely set on robbing the bank and whom nothing is going to stop from attempting to rob the bank. The deterrent value of a true physical protection system can be very high while at the same time providing protection of assets in the event of an attack. The physical threat to your facility must be defined as part of developing the objectives of the physical protection system. A methodology for defining the threat consists of listing the information needed to define the threat. A list of necessary information might include the type of adversary and possible adversary tactics, potential actions of the adversary, motivations of the adversary, and physical capabilities of the adversary. This is not to say that the threat is always a person or an adversary. A threat can be natural or can be man-made. Natural hazards typically refer to events such as earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, or hurricanes. Preparation for these natural hazards is accomplished by establishing a communication system in order to get information to employees and upper management. Information and periodic emergency training exercises are the best ways to be prepared and thereby reduce fear and anxiety. Threats from fire can be potentially devastating and can affect an organization beyond the physical damage. Not only fire, but also heat, smoke, and water can cause irreversible damage. This type of damage can keep a company from ever regaining its market share and is the leading cause of environmental failures for a company. The National Archives and Records Administration report states the following. Of businesses suffering a fire disaster, 43% never recover sufficiently to resume business. Of those that do reopen, only 29% are still operating 2 years later. Of companies that lost their IT, information technology, area for more than 9 days, 93% had filed for bankruptcy within 1 year of the disaster. Of businesses that found themselves without their data for more than 9 days, 50% filed for bankruptcy immediately thereafter. The fire protection system should maintain life safety protection and allow for safe evacuation from the building. A facility's fire protection water system should be protected from a single point of failure. The incoming line should be encased, buried, or located 50 feet away from high-risk areas. The interior mains should be looped and sectionalized. Water can be your main fire suppression tool, however, for electronic equipment, it will cause extreme damage. Thanks for taking the course. The following is some literature that was referenced in this course. References: The American Institute of Architects. 2004, Security Planning and Design, a guide for architects and building design professionals. Hoboken, New Jersey, Wiley Publishing. 2. Chapman, circa 1996. Project Risk Management, Processes, Techniques and Insights. New York, John Wiley & Sons. 3. Garcia, M. L., 2006. Vulnerability Assessment of Physical Protection Systems. Burlington, Massachusetts, Elsevier Butterworth Heinemann. 4. Kohler, G., 1999. Risk Assessment and Decision Making in Business and Industry. Huntersville, North Carolina, CRC Printing. 5. Kramsashown.com. 2007, Building a Defense In-Depth Toolkit. Retrieved March 1, 2007, from http://www.kramsashown.com/article/get-article.asp?8 6. Viega, J. and G. McGraw. 2002, Building Secure Software, How to Avoid Security Problems the Right Way. Boston, Massachusetts, Addison Wesley.